I'm Alan Wartes, and this is Think Radio Presents Think People. My guest today is writer, poet, and educator Peter Anderson.
You pass a ponderosa pine, and the wind was blowing, and I was thinking about that beautiful sound that happens when you get wind and ponderosas together. and it's unique. There's no other pine that creates that kind of effect with the wind, or the wind creates with the pine.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it like that. And the haiku that came out of it was, "Hey Ponderosa, are you playing the wind, or does the wind play you?"
Think People is underwritten by High Country News, telling the ongoing story of the modern American West. Through in-depth journalism and thought-provoking writing, the magazine has inspired people to act on behalf of the American West for 50 years. Learn more at hcn.org.
Welcome to another great conversation on Think Radio. If you like Think People, then I know you'll enjoy the other shows in the Think Radio Presents family of podcasts. Think Business, a weekly discussion with entrepreneurs, innovators, and disruptors on sustainable business into the 21st century. Think Planet, conversations with thought leaders on important environmental issues. Subscribe to Think Radio Presents on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever else you get great content. And don't forget to help us spread the word by liking our social media channels and sharing the content we post. We're grateful to have you in the conversation on Think Radio Presents. Anderson recently retired from the creative writing faculty at Adams State University in Alamosa, Colorado, where he helped shape emerging writers for about a decade. His most recent book is called Heading Home, Field Notes. It's a collection of flash prose and prose poems exploring rural life and what he calls the modern-day eccentricities of the American West. Peter co-edited Going Down Grand, Poems from the Canyon, which was nominated for a Colorado Book Award. He lives in the artist hamlet of Crestone, Colorado, where he currently organizes the Crestone Poetry Festival, which plays each February. That is when he's not working on new books and new stories and new poems. It's hard to find any writer anywhere capturing the essence of the American West any better than my good friend Peter Anderson. I'm really glad to have you with me today.
Thank you, Alan. It is just a pleasure to be here.
Any time to talk about poetry is a good day.
I think so.
And so let's start there. Let's just go right straight to the stratosphere.
Let's do. Do you want to talk about how we both met around poetry?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Tell that story.
So what was that, 15 years ago, there was a performance poetry festival in Salida called Sparrows, which has since become, missed greatly.
Oh, yeah. Anyone who was there mourns the loss of sparrows. And that had that was an acronym for something. Surviving winter.
Yeah, it was sort of like the sparrows were the only critters that were around in the middle of winter when we all gathered over there in Salida. But anyway, it was a fantastic event that drew poets and writers from all over the Four Corners region, really, in the Front Range. And a lot of us showed up to open mics, papers shaking, hands shaking, having a hard time reading our stuff. But gradually, we kind of got the hang of it. And there were a lot of people that showed up to Sparrows as novices that became performers, and a lot of people that showed up to the open mic that became polished poets, seasoned poets.
Yeah, well, you and I met because we gave back-to-back performances at an audition. Remember they had an audition that year?
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was... I think I followed you.
Did we pass the audition?
Well, here we are. We're still talking about poetry. They didn't vote us off the island.
They didn't kick us out anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the kind of inclusive sort of opportunity that was.
Yeah.
And it was all around words.
Yeah.
All around word pictures that you find in poetry.
For sure.
And here you are, all these years later. You've actually made a living.
We're still wrangling words, yeah.
Yeah, so did I. And so, why?
Why? Yeah. What is it about language and writing and poetry in particular that draws some of us together? I think poetry, maybe more than any other form of writing, is kind of a practice, can be a spiritual practice, certainly a contemplative practice. I think Mary Oliver just said something to the effect of, or once said something to the effect of, attention is the first step towards devotion. So
attention.
Yeah.
Noticing.
Right. Paying attention. And,
seeing what's there.
What better way to do it than to kind of sit down and try and find the exact right word to capture an experience or a feeling or a...
Well, because attention without that step can be fleeting.
For sure.
But the process of trying to capture it in just the right word, just the right phrase.
Yeah. There's a lot of patience involved, isn't there? I mean, it's not like just cranking out I started in the newspaper business, and I know you've been in newspapers for a while, and that's a matter of cranking out copy. It's not a matter of, spending a lot of time pondering the right word. You just have to get it done. But
editors rarely want anything that's poetic.
Right. But the poetry thing is a different process because we take a lot more time to write, something much smaller than even a newspaper article.
Well, and so in your experience, taking that extra time, tell me what you think that does to the act of observation itself. How does it change how we observe to add in this extra element of writing it?
That's a great question. Lately I've been reading a lot about the tradition of haiku and what that can do in terms of your observational skills or your observational abilities. And I've just been, I go out for a walk and I'll think in terms of a haiku, I'll see an image or something that'll be the first 5 syllables. Mm-hmm. So I'll just kind of walk with that for a while, and then let the next line come up, the 7-syllable line, and the third eventually. Hopefully, in the course of a walk, all 3 lines will fall into place. But but what it does is it encourages me to savor a particular image, a particular thing, or happening that I notice, in the course of a walk. So it's a direction of attention for sure. And
what's a good example of a recent walk where there was something that really caught your eye and you were able to savor it?
Okay, well, or it could be ear also, or nose.
Right.
But anyway, I was walking past a ponderosa pine and the wind was blowing, and I was thinking about that beautiful sound that happens when you get wind and ponderosas together. and it's unique. There's no other pine that creates that kind of effect with the wind, or the wind creates with the pine.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it like that. And the haiku that came out of it was, "Hey ponderosa, are you playing the wind, or does the wind play you?"
Exactly right.
Because what is creating that effect? Is it the needles? Is it the way the wind moves through the needles? Is it the way the needles move in the wind? I don't know. But
I don't think I want to know.
We don't need to know. We don't need to.
I just want to enjoy that and now think of it as a relationship, not just some sort of effect.
Yeah. So I carried that little haiku back to my house that day, and so it enabled me to kind of savor that moment of something I've enjoyed, my whole life living in the high country, but I'd never really stopped to put words to. So
yeah. Well, you've also spent a lot of time since we met teaching others to do this. Yeah. How has that changed your own perception of words and their value and writing to try to capture? Because it's well known. Yeah. The best way to understand something is to teach it.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you learned?
Well, I think to approach every student kind of where they are, because even in the intro class of creative writing at Adams State, people would come in at a lot of different levels. So, you can't expect people to be writing the same kind of quality stuff right off the bat necessarily, but you can kind of meet them where they are and go, okay, what is this soul trying to become through words, and then encourage that development, And I don't know, many years ago I went to a Quaker seminary, and what drew me there was they had a program called the Ministry of Writing. And at that time, people were starting to do writing in a lot of different contexts, like, for example, old folks' homes, or, homeless shelters, or
in other words, teaching those people to use words.
Yeah, underserved populations, that had no access to that kind of education. So that idea of writing as a ministry, service in the spirit kind of thing, something that encouraged people's own transformation or their growth, was a cool idea to me. And so I kind of brought that into, teaching at Adams State. There's a great quote that I would say a lot that comes from a Quaker writer named Douglas Steere. And he talked about, a meeting for worship as a place where you come together and you listen you listen to one another into a condition of discovery. And that very much sums it up as far as a good gathering of writers. If you're sharing work and whatnot, you're listening one another into a condition of discovery. Where you go, yeah. But it helps to have those listeners who are really with you, who are really paying attention, and can kind of help you along.
And did you find that your students were receptive to this kind of deeper level? They just wanted to come in. Maybe they were trying to get rid of a gen ed requirement.
Well,
maybe
there was some of that. Yeah, there was some of that.
But maybe some of them had been toying with the idea that, no, maybe I can do this.
Sure.
Did this open them up in a way that you
some?
you
some. Not all, but some. And I think that just that kind of welcoming, trying to create a welcoming space. I think that affected all students. At least when I was doing it well. And the other story that I always told, at the beginning of every creative writing class was the famous story about the poet William Stafford, who was asked about writer's block. And he said, writer's block? I don't worry about writer's block. I just lower my standards.
Yes.
So that sense of welcoming whatever words come, I think that if I could convey that in a creative writing class, and I think most of the time I was able to do that, then if nothing else, no matter what a student wrote in the course of that class, they at least had that sense that they could sit down and just kind of welcome whatever came. And that's the beginning of a good poem or a good piece of writing, in my opinion.
Well, and it actually opens the door to the next phase of this conversation, because it's also the beginning of good community.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of good society. It's not just about literary art.
Right.
It's the art of being a good human.
Yeah.
Inclusivity, receptivity, being open to what comes. You've reminded me of the William Carlos Williams quote. It's hard to read the news in a poem, yet people every day die for lack of what is found there.
It's a great quote.
Why do you think that's a great quote? Why is this important in the big picture sense? Not just whether a person writes well or not, but what it means to all of us.
Well, I think the news of poetry is different than the news of the newspaper. The news of poetry is kind of coming more out of the soul level of our existence, the kinds of things that maybe can only be articulated in poetry. And even then, poetry may try to articulate things that really can't be articulated at all, but we try anyhow. So that's the kind of news that we're sharing with each other when we're sharing poems. It's not the latest tweet or whatever, the kind of news that we get tired of, but it's the kind of news that nourishes the soul. And so in as much as we can create a space for that kind of an exchange to happen, we're sharing some, I think, pretty important news, so to speak.
Well, because it occurs to me that if you're paying attention to that kind of news, then you're somewhat less likely, perhaps, to fire off the angry or misinformed tweet.
It gives you a rudder. It gives you a center that you might not have otherwise, right? To kind of think, okay, well, that's over there, that's going on, but what's really important to me right here, right now?
And things like the sound of wind in a pine tree can be one of those important things.
Well, yeah. What's important to live in a good life? I think paying attention is certainly part of it. And the other thing about poetry, you could substitute read in that quote that you read from William Carlos Williams. You could substitute the word hear. It's hard to hear the news of poetry. And from going to events like Sparrows that when you're listening to poetry, it's really an art. It's really, you have to really try hard to hear what's coming at you and to absorb it. And
Yeah.
And even if you practice a lot, I mean, there'll be a lot of times where I'm listening to a poem and I'm, 3 or 4 lines in or whatever, and I lose the thread. And so it's a constant invitation to practice the art of listening, which I think, getting back to what makes us human, what's important about being human, that quality of being able to listen really deeply to somebody is pretty important.
Well, and the word that comes to my mind is presence.
Yeah.
To be present. In order to listen that deeply, you have to be present. And I think a lot of people blame the poem or the poet for the difficulty sometimes in keeping the thread.
Yeah.
And no doubt, some writing is more obscure than others.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But it wouldn't hurt us to acknowledge that if poetry is not speaking directly to me right this moment, it may be that I'm not listening well enough.
Could be.
Yeah, and what that would do to my ability to inhabit my place and my time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, what are we missing in our day-to-day life? What things don't we notice as much as we might like to? Listening to people read or composing a poem and just listening to what your experience is telling you. Those are important aspects of the poetic process that can inform other aspects of our lives too.
Sure, like listening to the nuances in what your coworker says to you and being able to hear, okay, things are not quite right with this person. I need to reach out and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm making this up, but there are dozens of examples that we could think of how that would improve daily life.
I mean, most of us can always use more practice at listening well and listening deeply, So in as much as poetry enables us to do that, it's a really useful project.
Yeah. I'm intrigued by the description of Heading Home, your most recent book.
Yeah.
What is it that captivates you enough that you want to write about the modern-day eccentricities of the American West? What are those? and what was it that made you say, wow, that's worth exploring?
Yeah. Well, I grew up on the East Coast and came west in 1974. So ever since then, I've kind of thought of myself as a student of the West. It's not my native home, but it has been my home for 40 years. And, I've tried to make a conscious effort to learn place and culture and listen to the people that I'm around and, pay attention to what I'm seeing as I'm walking through this geography, et cetera. I live in a very eccentric town, as you know. Crestone's a pretty eccentric place and is known for that.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of eccentricities in my habitat these days, but it's not limited to Crestone. Western American culture has all sorts of oddities and eccentricities that aren't hard to find. I mean, if you travel around at all,
things like what?
Well, like for example, Highway 17, where I live, has a couple of interesting roadside attractions. We've got the Aliens Watchtower, UFO Watchtower, right, on Highway 17, where people go and hang out, hopefully to see a UFO. And then,
and let's be clear, okay, because the San Luis Valley is well known as a hotbed of cattle mutilations.
Right, there you go. That's another oddity.
So some people who built that tower, maybe they weren't just making that up.
No. I mean, people talk about it all the time. I've lived there for 18 years. I've never seen a UFO yet. I'm open to it, But
well, have you climbed the tower?
I haven't gone up the tower. Maybe that's my problem.
Yeah.
But on down the road, you've got the alligator farm, right?
Mm-hmm. In the middle of Colorado.
Yeah. So. That's the kind of eccentricity that we see just, roadside attractions. But I mean, and that's maybe an extreme example. But no, I think living in this kind of geographical space invites a different way of seeing the world and being in the world, and maybe that creates some eccentricity too.
Mm-hmm. No matter where you live in the West, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is it that there are things about your environment that are different?
I think so. And I mean, I spent 10 years living in Utah, and Utah certainly has a lot of odd and interesting cultural aspects that aren't necessarily found in any other state. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a retro sort of place that time forgot feeling in a lot of Utah that isn't intentional. It's just the way it is, Well,
one of the things that I think people don't realize, unless you've been here, is that the expansion of the American West sort of went by places like western Colorado and Utah and Nevada. It wasn't a linear progression. By the time we got to California, it wasn't that this country was firmly settled.
Yeah.
So in many ways, there's this lingering pioneer sort of flavor to everything that goes on.
Sure. Yeah. And that's especially strong in Utah.
And how did that wind up in your book? I mean,
well, I'm trying to think of some of the pieces in here that are maybe celebrate some of the kind of eccentricities we're talking about. Well, here's kind of a funny one that might address some of what we're talking about.
And this is from Heading Home Field Notes.
So this is a little prose poem piece called Great Divide, Lonely Hearts Club. And I was just imagining the want ads, in the high country in the middle of winter. And so I kind of came up with these different characters that maybe speak to some of the different kinds of characters that we're likely to run into in our neck of the woods here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is called Great Divide, Lonely Hearts Club. And there's kind of different voices for each of these characters, and I'll just go ahead and read in those voices, at least as I hear them.
Yeah, do it.
Okay. Me, recently relocated investment queen, 55, big city successful and small town bored, missing summers in Southampton, finding some solace in mountain sunsets and well-watered lawns, looking for bullish stock buddy ready for bottom fishing adventures. You, strong-jawed CEO look, Ivy League pedigree with a passion for cocktails, steaks, and the Dow, and a robust and well-diversified portfolio. Country club experience preferred. Must know how to handle your putter. I'm eager to massage your bottom line and watch your portfolio grow. Let's make something happen before the closing bell. Please, no Democrats. Tiffy, Aspen, Colorado. 2, mildly depressed river dude, 25, with low water, bad biz blues. I'm over the daily slog on this bony-ass river, tired of rubber and glue, warehouse scene, tip stash spent on 50-cent PBRs to Vic, looking for shoulder season sweetheart, saving for flight to Chile in November, so your generous pocketbook a plus. I'm tan, ripped, and ready for a good time float. Let's find a way to ride out these lame riffles, baby. Late summer and spark and groove guaranteed. No commitments either way. 3. Oh, that was Rip Raft from Salida. 3. Potato farmer, 57, busy with 450 acres of russets, fingerlings, rose reds, and purple majesties, dizzy from too many years of riding the big circles, looking for a woman, John Deere steady, who can straighten me out. Bulk truck driving skills a plus. Come waltz me through this harvest. If you'll bake, boil, mash, and hash, I'll oil up the skillet and wash the dishes. Hollow Heart, Mosca, Colorado. 4. Hard rock miner, 45, too long, solitary mucker, once double-jacking gal with a steady hand. Hold that steel and I'll ride the big sledge home. Let's take it down and make some hole together. You're hankering for rock dust, silver dollar closing time a must. Me, all boom, no bust. Buck from Leadville. 5. Discouraged female earthling looking for extraterrestrial with holographic or multidimensional transportation who can navigate Armageddon. I want a hunka cosmic cool who can unbind my consciousness and take me away. I'm no newbie on this circuit, so I know my intergalactic protocol. You want integrated cosmic awareness of space, time, and matter? I've got it down. Also handy with lasers and electromagnetic signals. I'm waiting. Please don't leave me in the void much longer. Astrid, somewhere near Highway 17, San Luis Valley.
Peter, I've met every single one of those people.
We have all those types. I mean, we have just this great coming together of all these, interesting types of humanity in our region.
Yeah, and there's something about the landscape that attracts them. Something I shouldn't say them, us.
Us, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Somebody right now is capturing us in a poem about the literary types that congregate in Crestone.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
the poets wearing berets or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, well done. Well done. Well, as I said, I think your voice capturing the American West is really, really a pleasure. I think unless you've been here, it's hard to know that this place does stand apart.
Yeah.
It is something else. And so now you've turned your attention to organizing a party, a poetry party.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, we're trying to put together a festival along the lines of what Sparrows was in Salida many, many years ago, and just kind of create I kind of think of it as a literary campfire, where people can come and gather around for a couple of days, share some poems, hear some poems, learn some craft, some skills from some seasoned poets. But, hopefully build some community, especially with people living in rural areas in our state and New Mexico. I want to try and offer something to them because we can get pretty isolated.
Yeah.
And I think one of the exciting things about the Sparrows Festival in Salida many years ago was many of us were living in kind of, small, relatively out-of-the-way places, and it was really nice to come together with some kindred spirits who were interested in books and literature and poetry and whatnot. And that's what we hope to do in Crestone at the end of February.
So talk to those people for a moment.
Yeah.
Who have never been to a Sparrows-like event. Oh, they really like to write.
Yeah.
They've got notebooks full of journals and poems that they've written, but they wouldn't dare read one out loud.
Well, that's the way you and I were when we first met, right?
Yeah,
or at least I was.
Absolutely.
So it's an opportunity to kind of push yourself a little bit into that space where maybe, just maybe, you'll have the courage to get up in front of a microphone and read something that you've always wanted to read but never have really been, had the courage to do. So I hope that we can create a friendly space for that kind of thing to happen. Because it's exciting, when you break through that barrier, when you get up there and your hands are shaking, but you read through it anyway, and then after the second and third time, you get better at it, and maybe the fourth or fifth time you add a little, performance flourish of some kind, and then on down the road, you can be a pretty seasoned performer, but it takes some practice, and this is a great kind of event for one to practice those skills. But more important than that, I think just the encouragement that you get from people that are kind of in the same boat. That people are willing to share their work with you, then you share something back and forth like that, can really make some sparks fly. And like I say, keep the campfire burning.
Well, and go home with some sort of reassurance that, okay, maybe I'm never going to win a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
Almost certainly never going to win a Pulitzer Prize. Let's calculate the odds, right?
Yeah.
But I belong in a community of writers.
And now you know that there's this community of people out there in your region, your neighbors, that care about some of the same stuff that you care about. Which is exciting and empowering. So. Yeah, that's what we hope to create, nurture, but also just to have some fun with the spoken word. And we've got a wide range of poets coming, from performing poets, slam poets to more academic poets and everything in between. And no one sort of poetic tradition is favored over the other. It's a big mix. It's an amalgam of every kind of voice you could imagine, I hope. The more diverse we can make it, the better. And I think we're getting there. But in any event, if you've never been to something like this, it's a great opportunity just to kind of come see how it feels to be around a bunch of wordsmiths for a couple of days and see how it feels to take in a bunch of the news of poetry, see what it stirs in your soul.
And be prepared.
Be
because
prepared.
It will probably stir something.
It will stir something. It will stir something. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist Way years ago.
Yeah.
And she structured that book as a 12-step recovery program
Yep.
for artists,
Mm-hmm.
poets included. And it sold like wildfire because it touched something in people that we didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
Exactly. What do you think that thing is? Why is it that a 12-step recovery program for artists would resonate so strongly?
Well, I think there are a lot of addictions that get in the way of doing good writing. There are a lot of ways that we numb ourselves out that keep us from doing good work on the page. And so, we have to. One of the things that she did in her book, which was fascinating, was she suggested that you go on a 1-week reading fast. And,
yeah.
I tried that with my wife Grace, and I had no idea how hooked I was to the written word. I mean, it just but not not in a discriminating way necessarily, just like kind of anything.
Right.
So I tried not to read, for if I was like on day 5 or day 6, and I was in a 7-Eleven or something like that, and I picked up the Easy Shop or whatever it is, and it started just, automatically started, and I went, oh my God, it's really hard to, and sometimes even reading can be a way of filling up space that might otherwise receive or be hospitable to words coming from the inside. Interesting.
Well, and to cover up some of the less than pleasant voices that may be coming from the inside.
Some of the ones we don't want to hear.
You hear these stories about a child who loved to sing until someone told them they couldn't.
Well, again, William Stafford has a great quote. Somebody asked him one time, well, so when did you become a poet? And he said, well, when did you stop being a poet? Because, we do have, some abilities as, when we're young that we kind of get educated out of us in a way, which is kind of sad. But we can recover that, and I think that's what...
well, that's the good news.
That's the good news. And in terms of, like Julia Cameron's book or thinking about... creative writing as a sort of recovery thing. In a sense, we're recovering a part of ourselves that maybe has been obscured or been diminished or been educated out of us or whatever.
But that is there.
That's there. It never goes away.
No matter who you are?
Yeah, I think so.
In whatever measure?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, another good reason to come to a poetry festival.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Exactly right.
And do what you can to excavate that.
Sure. Bound to feed your soul and spirit on some level, I think. Yeah.
Peter, what are you working on now?
Well, I am working on a mystery, which I've never done a long piece of fiction before, so this is a new project. But it's a mystery set in my town, a town very much like Crestone, let's put it that way, fictional version of Crestone. And
a lot of people say Crestone is fictional already.
Well, right. People are definitely living some interesting fictions there. But no, this is a chance for me to kind of celebrate my town in all its diversity and eccentricity by way of a fictional story. And so it's about this retired English professor ends up in this town, and his neighbor turns out to be a deputy sheriff who is part of a sheriff's department that's really understaffed and has to cover, a huge amount of territory, kind of like in Saguache County. And there's a missing persons case that this professor gets involved in, and he also gets involved in or gets to know the ex-girlfriend of the missing guy. And so this is all a vehicle, to create kind of a mystery story in this community that, having lived there for almost 20 years now, I've got some stories to tell. So it's just a way of kind of opening the door to that.
Well, and if the poem that you read us is any indication, the people in this story are likely to be fascinating characters.
For sure. There's going to be a few. Yeah.
Well, Pete, unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay, Alan. Well, listen, this has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you, inviting me into this conversation. And just remind people in leaving that The Crestone Poetry Festival is February 21st to the 24th, coming up pretty soon. And the website is poemfest.com. You can get all the info you need right there.
Excellent.
So I hope...
Go take a look.
Hope you can come.
Well, we're looking at the calendar right now.
Good.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, friend. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Always.
Okay.
Join us next week for another great conversation on Think Radio Presents Think People.